resuming debate at this point with the honourable member for Saint-Louis. Lac-Saint-Louis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It gives me a great pleasure to rise on this very important piece of legislation, which, of course, was introduced in the last Parliament, but did not proceed much further because of the election. I'd like to begin my speech on this bill by saying there's an observable pattern of behavior with the Conservative government in terms of how it approaches very complex and important issues like the issue of human smuggling, Madam Speaker. It seems that when the government approaches issues like this, it approaches them without sufficient forethought, without focus on the core of a problem, without focus on the substance of an issue. In other words, what we see with this government is a kind of focus on sloganeering, photo ops, sometimes to the detriment of dealing with the core of the issue. For example, we've seen this with the issue of human smuggling. We've seen it with other issues like sentencing reform, where the government doesn't address the issue when it should address the issue. It addresses the issue once there has been a headline in the media that attracts public concern. For example, about a year before it introduced Bill C-49, the government introduced Bill C-11, which was a source of much attention because there was a compromise with the opposition parties to fast-track, which led to the fast-tracking of the bill. And one would think that the government, if it had had the foresight that one would expect of a government that has all the resources at its disposal to look at an issue in all its aspects and to be forward-looking, one would think that the government would have dealt with the issue of human smuggling in that bill. But it didn't. It didn't react to the issue of human smuggling until the Sun-Sea arrived to much media attention, until, in other words, until the issue of human smuggling became a sensational visual on the evening news, Madam Speaker. So that's why I'm saying that the government is not doing its homework when it's presenting legislation in the first place. It is not acting in a timely manner on issues that it knows will become important issues that it will have to deal with on behalf of Canadians, Madam Speaker. Now, let's be absolutely clear. We have no issue with the fact that we have to protect the national security of Canadians and ensure that we do not allow criminals and terrorists to enter this country, to live in this country, and to put the safety of Canadians at risk. We have, as a Liberal opposition, absolutely no quarrel with the objective of the bill, which is to ensure that refugees who are accepted into Canada are legitimate refugees and that they do not pose a threat to the safety of Canadians. But, Madam Speaker, it's also very important that we adhere to certain principles when we vote on legislation, that we do not vote for bills that offend the principles of the Charter of Rights, for example. In other words, it is our duty as parliamentarians not to support legislation that can be deemed unconstitutional. And there's a practical reason for saying this. It's not just an academic statement to say that, well, we should not. We have a duty to uphold charter principles or constitutional principles. There's a practical element to what I'm saying, because if we adopt legislation that is not charter-proof and that winds up in the courts, those bills, that legislation whatever it may be, will be struck down by the court, and then Canadians are left without the protection that they need, without the protection that was intended to be in the particular piece of legislation that has been deemed unconstitutional. So it's a very practical concern that we get it right the first time, Madam Speaker, or we're going to run into problems in the long run. Either, as I said before, we will be voting for a bill that does not properly deal with all aspects of an issue, only to have to rush back later and pass legislation at the last minute to resolve or to resolve a problem or to correct a lacuna in the previous legislation, or, as I said, we will wind up with legislation, with a bill or with legislation that has been struck down, Madam Speaker. There seems to be an attitude on the part of the government that it doesn't matter whether a bill meets the Charter test, that we'll just pass it now, and if someone challenges it in future, we'll let the courts deal with that. I call that a so sue me attitude. In other words, you may be telling me that my bill or my legislation is not charter-proof. I don't care. Sue me later. And I think that's a very inappropriate way to approach public policy, Madam Speaker. Before I proceed to a discussion, a detailed discussion of Liberal Party reservations about this bill, there are 3 points I would like to make, and one of them has been made already today, I know. One is that refugees are not queue jumpers. And there's a misconception among the public that refugees are queue jumpers. And what happens is, Canadians obviously react badly to the notion that someone's rightful place is being taken by another person whose claim in the queue is not legitimate. And so I know many people who are fine Canadians who believe in charter principles and in human rights, who react negatively to when they are told that refugees are queue jumpers, and that pains me a great deal to see them misled by the confusion that has been allowed to stand on this issue. So that's the first point, Madam Speaker. Refugees are not queue jumpers. The second point I would like to make is that, for the benefit of those watching at home or listening or who will be reading these debates, the second point I would like to make is that there is a system for determining in this country. I believe the time is up. Is that what you're telling me, Madam Speaker?
L'honorable député pourra reprendre lorsque ce débat reviendra à l'ordre du jour, mais l'heure est maintenant, comme il est 18h30, la Chambre s'ajourne jusqu'à demain à 14h.